when wilderness guide Jake Sullivan pulled a drowning Mustang Foal from a raging river. He expected the herd to flee in terror. Instead, 20 wild horses surrounded him in a circle, trapping him with their precious baby. What happened next challenged everything we know about wild horse behavior and proved that gratitude transcends species. This incredible true story will leave you speechless and forever change how you see these magnificent creatures. Jake Sullivan had been guiding wilderness tours through Nevada's Ruby Mountains for 15 years, but he'd never seen the Carson River this angry. Spring snowmelt combined with unexpected rainfall had transformed the usually calm waterway into a churning monster that roared through the canyon. "We need to head back," Jake told his group of 6 tourists, eyeing the dark clouds building overhead. At 42, his weathered face bore the marks of countless days in the harsh Nevada sun, and his instincts were screaming danger. As they turned their horses back toward base camp, a sound cut through the river's roar, a high-pitched shriek of pure terror. Jake pulled up his mount, scanning the turbulent waters. There, 50 yards downstream, something dark bobbed in the current. "That's a foal," gasped Linda Chen, one of his clients, pointing at the struggling form. Jake's heart sank. A young Mustang, maybe for months old, was being swept downstream, its head barely above water. The current slammed it against rocks, and each impact weakened its desperate fight. Without thinking, Jake was off his horse and running along the bank. "Jake, no!" shouted Tom, his assistant guide. The current's too strong. But Jake had already spotted his chance, a fallen tree extending into the river just ahead of the foal's path. If he could reach it in time, he sprinted harder than his middle-aged legs had moved in years, crashing through the brush, ignoring the branches tearing at his clothes. He reached the tree just as the foal approached. Without hesitation, Jake crawled out onto the slippery trunk, the river spray soaking him instantly. The tree groaned under his weight, threatening to break free and join the flood. The foal's eyes rolled white with terror as it tumbled past. Jake lunged, his hands finding the baby's mane. The impact nearly tore him from the tree, but he held on, muscles screaming as he fought both the current and the foal's panic thrashing. "Stop fighting me," Jake grunted, trying to pull the foal closer. It was a bay with a distinctive white blaze, someone's baby, though whose he couldn't imagine. No Mustang herd was visible on either bank. The tree shifted ominously. Jake knew he had seconds before they'd both be swept away. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength, he hauled the foal against the tree, then somehow lifted it partially onto the trunk. "Tom, rope!" he screamed over the water's roar. His assistant was already there, throwing a lasso with practiced precision. Jake caught it quickly, securing it around the foal's chest. Together with the tourists, forming a human chain, they dragged both man and horse to safety. The foal collapsed on the bank, coughing up river water, its small body shaking with cold and shock. Jake fell beside it, his own body trembling from exertion. He'd saved a foal, but now what? This young one needed its mother, its herd, alone. It would die within days. That's when he heard it, the thunder of hooves from the ridge above. Jake looked up to see shapes appearing along the skyline. One by one, wild Mustangs materialized until 20 stood silhouetted against the storm clouds. They had been watching. The whole time, the herd had been watching, and now they were coming down. Jake's blood ran cold as the Mustang herd descended from the ridge. Wild horses were unpredictable, and a herd protecting their young could be deadly. He slowly stood, placing himself between the approaching horses and his terrified tour group. "Everyone, back to your horses," he said quietly. "Mount up, but don't run. Move slowly." The lead mare reached the bottom first, a magnificent buckskin with intelligent eyes that seemed to assess everything. Behind her, the herd spread out in a wide arc. Jake counted 22 horses, mares, yearlings, and 3 powerful stallions who positioned themselves strategically. The bay foal struggled to its feet at the sound of its family. It whinnied weakly, and the buckskin mare answered with a sound that could only be described as frantic relief. This was the mother. Jake could see it in how her entire body oriented toward her baby. "Easy, Mama," Jake murmured, slowly backing away. "I'm not going to hurt you." The lead stallion, a massive black horse with scars marking years of battles, stepped forward and screamed a challenge not at the foal, but at Jake. The sound echoed off the canyon walls. Primal and terrifying, Jake froze. Running would trigger their chase instinct. Fighting was impossible. He stood perfectly still, hands visible, trying to project calm despite his hammering heart. The foal took a shaky step toward its mother, then another. That's when everything changed. Instead of reuniting with her baby, the buckskin mare walked past the foal straight toward Jake. The other horses moved too, not aggressively, but with purpose. Within moments, they'd formed a complete circle around him, their bodies creating a living wall. "Jake," Linda called out, alarmed. "Stay back," Jake warned, his voice steady despite his confusion. Nobody moves. He was trapped in the center of a circle of wild horses close enough to touch several of them. Their breath steamed in the cool air, and he could smell their earthy scent. But they weren't attacking. They were just standing there. The bay foal, confused by its mother's behavior, stumbled into the circle and pressed against Jake's leg. He felt its wet coat, still cold from the river, shivering against him. Instinctively, Jake put his hand on the baby's neck, offering comfort. That simple gesture changed everything. The buckskin mare stepped closer, lowering her head to sniff Jake's other hand, the one that had pulled her baby from death. Her nostrils flared, reading his scent, the story written in river water. Fear and desperate courage. Then she did something that made Jake's jaw drop. She rested her forehead against his chest and held it there. One by one, other horses followed suit. They approached Jake with lowered heads, touching him gently with their muzzles, his hands, his arms, his shoulders. Even the battle-scarred stallion approached, though he maintained the dignity of leadership, touching Jake's shoulder briefly before resuming his watch. "Are you seeing this?" Tom whispered from outside the circle, his phone recording everything. Jake couldn't speak. In 15 years of wilderness guiding and observing hundreds of Mustang herds, he had never witnessed anything like this. The horses weren't just acknowledging him, they were thanking him. Each touch felt deliberate and meaningful, like a blessing being bestowed. The foal's mother returned to Jake's side, positioning herself so her baby was between them. Together, surrounded by the herd, they stood in a moment of perfect understanding that transcended the divide between wild and human. For 10 minutes, Jake remained motionless within the circle of horses, afraid any movement might break whatever spell had been cast. The foal had stopped shivering, warmed by its mother's presence, and Jake's steady hand on its neck. The herd stood silent, patient as if waiting for something. Then the buckskin mare began to move. She walked slowly round Jake, her nose low, examining him from every angle. The other horses watched intently as she completed her circuit. When she returned to face him, she performed an action that would haunt Jake forever. She bowed the mare's front legs bent, lowering her chest toward the ground in an unmistakable gesture of respect. Her eyes never left Jake's face. The sight of a wild Mustang, proud, untamed, freebowing to a human, was so profound that Jake felt tears sting his eyes, as if on cue. The other mares followed suit. One by one, they lowered themselves in the same gesture, creating a ripple effect round the circle. Even the young horses attempted the movement, though less gracefully. Only the stallions remained standing, but they too showed acknowledgement, arching their powerful necks and pawing the ground gently. "My God," breathed Dr. Sarah Winters, a veterinarian among the tour group. "This is unprecedented. I study equine behavior, and this is deliberate communication." The lead stallion suddenly moved, breaking from the circle. Jake tensed, but the horse wasn't approaching him. Instead, the stallion walked to a nearby pippin pine and began pawing at its base. Other horses joined him, and within moments they'd excavated something from the loose soil. The stallion returned, carrying something in his mouth. He approached Jake with measured steps, then dropped the object at his feet. It was a stone, smooth, round, almost perfectly white. The kind of stone that stood out in this red rock country, that a horse might notice and remember. "He's giving you a gift," Dr. Winters whispered in amazement. "They're actually giving you a gift." More horses brought offerings: a bright feather, a piece of sun-bleached wood, a cluster of dried flowers that somehow survived beneath the soil. Each item was placed carefully at Jake's feet. creating a small pile of treasures that meant nothing to humans, but clearly held significance for the herd. The ceremony reached its crescendo when the buckskin mare nudged her foal forward. The baby, now steady on its legs, looked up at Jake with bright eyes. The mare nickered softly, and incredibly the foal mimicked its mother's bow, wobbly, but unmistakable. Jake couldn't hold back his tears now. He knelt slowly, making himself smaller, less threatening. The foal approached and pressed its small muzzle against Jake's cheek, breathing warmly against his skin. At that moment, Jake felt something shift inside him, a connection to the wild that went beyond anything he'd experienced. The mare watched this interaction with approval, then with some invisible signal Jake couldn't perceive. The ceremony ended. The horses began to step back, the circle opening, but they didn't flee. They simply gave him space, their eyes still on him, waiting. Jake understood. They were giving him permission to leave, but also something more. He gathered the gifts, the stone, feather, wood, and flowers, holding them like the treasures they were. As he stepped out of where the circle had been, each horse he passed would touch him one final time, a brush of a muzzle, a gentle nudge, a warm breath. He was no longer just a human who'd saved a foal. He was something else now, friend, protector, worthy of their wild trust. Jake thought the encounter was over as he rejoined his awestruck tour group. The horses had reunited. As a family, the mare grooming her foal while the herd grazed peacefully nearby. But as Jake led his group back toward camp, he noticed something strange. The Mustangs were following them. Not closely, they maintained a respectful distance of about 50 yards, but deliberately. When Jake's group moved, the herd moved. When they stopped to rest the horses, the Mustangs stopped too, grazing but always watching. "This is starting to feel weird," Tom muttered, glancing back at their wild escort. "Beautiful, but weird." By the time they reached base camp, news of the rescue had spread. Jake's satellite phone had been buzzing with calls from local news stations who had seen Tom's uploaded video. But Jake ignored them all, focused on the mystery of why the herd continued to shadow them. Camp was a simple affair, a cluster of tents near a natural spring, a corral for the riding horses, and a fire pit for evening gatherings. The Mustangs positioned themselves on a rise overlooking the camp, clear spectators to the human activity below. As sunset approached, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something remained unfinished. The gifts from the horses sat in his tent, and he found himself drawn to them repeatedly. The white stone especially seemed to pulse with meaning he couldn't decipher. That night, as the tour group sat around the campfire sharing their amazement, the sound of hooves announced a visitor. The buckskin mare stood at the edge of the firelight, her foal beside her. Behind them, barely visible, the herd waited. "Nobody move," Jake instructed softly. Though his tourists were already frozen in wonder, the mare stepped forward, unafraid of the fire, unusual for a wild horse. She walked directly to Jake and nudged his chest with her nose, then turned to look back at her herd. The message seemed clear, come. Against every rational thought, Jake stood and followed her. Tom started to protest, but Dr. Winters grabbed his arm. "Let him go," she whispered. "This is bigger than us." The mare led Jake up the rise to where the herd waited. In the moonlight, he could see they'd formed another circle, but this one was different. In the center lay an old horse, ancient by wild standards, probably 25 or more. Her coat was gray with age, her back swayed, and her breathing was labored. The mare guided Jake to the elder's side. Up close, he could see the old mare was dying. Her eyes, though clouded with age, tracked his movement. The herd stood witness as Jake knelt beside her, understanding flooding through him. "You want me to?" He couldn't finish the sentence. How could they know he'd worked as a veterinary assistant in his youth? How could they understand he might offer comfort in these final hours? The elder mare lifted her head slightly, pressing her muzzle into Jake's hand. He stroked her neck gently, speaking soft words that transcended language. The herd stood silent vigil as Jake provided what comfort he could, adjusting her position to ease her breathing, offering water from his canteen, simply being present. For 2 hours, Jake sat with a dying mare while her family surrounded them. When the end came, it was peaceful. The old mare's breathing simply slowed, then stopped, her head resting in Jake's lap. The herd's reaction was immediate and profound, a collective sound that was part sigh, part song. They'd brought him here for this. Somehow, they'd known he would help, would ensure their matriarch didn't die alone and afraid. They'd trusted him with their most sacred moment. As Jake gently laid the elder's head on the ground and stood, the herd pressed closer, not threatening, but including him in their grief, their ceremony of farewell. He was no longer an outsider. He was part of their story now. Dawn broke over the mountains as Jake returned to camp, emotionally drained from the night's vigil. The herd had remained with their fallen elder, performing their own rituals of farewell. But as the sun climbed higher, they appeared again on the ridge, waiting. "Jake, you need to see this," Dr. Withers called urgently from the corral. The tour group's horses were agitated, pacing, and whinnying. But it wasn't fear, it was excitement. The domestic horses were calling to the Mustangs, and the wild ones were answering. A conversation across the divide between captivity and freedom. "I've studied horses for 30 years, Dr. Withers said, "and I've never seen anything like this. It's like they're sharing information." The buckskin mare descended from the ridge, her foal trotting beside her. This time, she approached the corral directly. The tour horses pressed against the rails, stretching their necks to touch noses with their wild cousins. Even Jake's steady mount, Duke, seemed eager to communicate with the visitors. Then the mare did something that changed Jake's life forever. She led her foal to him and gently pushed the baby forward with her nose. The message was unmistakable. She was presenting her child formally, asking for something Jake couldn't quite understand. The foal looked up at him with bright, intelligent eyes. The white blaze on its face seemed to glow in the morning light. It nickered softly, then pressed against Jake's chest just as it had after the rescue. "She wants you to name it," Dr. Withers said suddenly. "In many cultures, naming creates a bond. She's asking you to be this foal's protector. Not to take it, but to be its human guardian." Jake's throat tightened. The weight of the request was enormous. To accept meant a lifetime connection. To this wild herd, a responsibility he had never sought. But looking into the mare's trusting eyes, he couldn't refuse. "River," he said softly, touching the foal's blaze. "Your name is River because that's where our stories joined." The effect was immediate. The mare nickered approvingly, and the herd on the ridge responded with a chorus of calls. River, now named, now connected, pranced in a circle before, returning to nurse from his mother. But the ceremony wasn't over. The lead stallion descended from the ridge, approaching Jake with decisive steps. In his mouth, he carried something that made everyone gasp, a bundle of hair from the elder mare's mane. Twisted together like a rope, he dropped it at Jake's feet, then fixed him with a stare that seemed to pierce his soul. This wasn't just a gift, it was a token, a responsibility, a promise. Jake understood instinctively. He was to carry this, to remember, to be part of their herd, even when miles separated them. "They're making you family," Tom said in wonder. "Actual family." The tour group extended their stay by 3 days, nobody wanting to leave the magic. During that time, the herd integrated Jake into their routines. They showed him their water sources, their favorite grazing spots, and their hidden valleys where they sheltered from storms. River would often leave his mother to walk beside Jake, learning to trust the human who'd saved him. On the final morning, as Jake prepared to lead his group back to civilization, the entire herd assembled. They formed one last circle around him. But this time, he stood confident in the center, understanding his place in their world. Each horse passed by him, touching him one final time. River lingered longest, pressing his small face against Jake's chest, breathing in his scent to remember. The buckskin mare was last, and she left him with a look that said everything. "Watch over him from afar, always." As Jake's group rode away, the herd followed to the edge of their territory. There they stood, silhouetted against the sky, calling their farewells. Jake carried their gifts, the stone, the feather, the elder's hair, close to his heart. He would return. They knew it, and he knew it. The bond forged in rushing water and sealed in moonlit grief was unbreakable. He was their human now, and they were his wild family. 6 months passed before Jake could return to the Ruby Mountains. The video of the Mustangs bowing to him had gone viral, bringing unwanted attention to the area. Wildlife officials had to increase patrols to keep curious tourists from harassing the herd. Jake refused all interview requests, feeling the story wasn't his to sell. But October's arrival brought an urgent message from a ranger friend. The Mustangs are in trouble. They keep coming to the road looking for someone. We think it's you. Jake left immediately, driving through the night to reach the mountains. What he found broke his heart. The herd was camped near the highway, dangerously close to traffic. Several had been injured by vehicles, and the buckskin mare looked thin and stressed. They've been here for weeks, Ranger Martinez explained. We've tried to drive them back to safety, but they return every day. That mare stands by the road for hours just watching. Jake parked and stepped out. The effect was immediate. The mare's head shot up, and she released a call that brought the entire herd running. They surrounded his truck, snickering and touching him through the windows. River, now a sturdy yearling, pressed his face against the glass, recognizing Jake instantly. Okay. Jake laughed through tears. I'm here. I'm sorry I was gone so long. But as the joy of reunion faded, Jake noticed what the rangers had warned him about. Several horses bore vehicle strike injuries. Nothing fatal, but painful scrapes and cuts. The herd's condition had deteriorated, their coats dull, their eyes anxious. They had been sacrificing their safety, waiting by the dangerous road for his return. They're going to get killed if this continues, Martinez said grimly. We may have to relocate them forcibly. No, Jake said firmly. Give me 3 days. Let me try something. He set up camp in their old spot by the spring. The herd followed, visibly relieved to be away from the road. That first night, Jake tended their injuries with supplies he'd brought. The horses stood patiently for his ministrations. They trusted him completely, even the mighty stallions, allowing him to clean their wounds. River had grown magnificently, his white blaze now a striking lightning bolt against his bay coat. He shadowed Jake constantly, learning by observation. When Jake treated the other horses, River would mirror his movements, gently nosing the injured areas as if he could heal. On the second night, Jake made a decision that would define their relationship forever. He took out the elder mare's hair he'd carried for 6 months and began to braid it into a bracelet. As he worked by the firelight, the herd gathered close, watching intently. When he finished, he held up the bracelet for them to see, then tied it around his wrist. The herd's response was profound. They pressed closer, touching the bracelet with their noses, recognizing their matriarch's hair. Jake had made their memory part of him, visible and permanent. I understand now, he told them, though he knew they comprehended tone more than words. You weren't just waiting for me. You were making sure I'd come back, testing if the bond was real. The buckskin mare stepped forward and rested her head against his shoulder, a gesture of complete trust and affection. River joined them, creating a 3-way embrace that lasted several minutes. The rest of the herd stood witness to this moment, a covenant renewed. On the 3rd day, Jake led them back to their traditional territory. Far from the dangerous road, they followed without hesitation, trusting his guidance. At a high meadow with panoramic views, he stopped and turned to face them. This is your home, he said firmly. Stay here, stay safe. I'll come back, I promise. Every season, I'll return. But you must stay away from the roads. Whether they understood his words or simply sensed his intent, the herd seemed to accept the arrangement. They spread out to graze, visibly more relaxed in their proper habitat. River stayed close to Jake until the very last moment, as if memorizing every detail. As Jake prepared to leave, the herd performed one final ritual. They lined up, all 21 survivors, in a perfect row. One by one, they passed by Jake, each touching him briefly. It was a goodbye, but also a promise. They would wait here in safety for his return. River was last. The young horse pressed his face against Jake's chest, breathing deeply. Then he did something remarkable. He bowed, just as his mother had taught him, holding the position for several seconds. When he raised his head, Jake saw understanding in those young eyes. River knew Jake would return. The bond was sealed. The promise was made. Distance meant nothing to hearts connected by trust. 5 years have passed since Jake Sullivan pulled a drowning foal from the Carson River. What began as one moment of heroism has evolved into something that has changed conservation practices throughout Nevada and beyond. Jake now splits his time between his guide business and his work with the Bureau of Land Management's new Guardian program, an initiative inspired by his unique relationship with the Ruby Mountain herd. Selected individuals are paired with specific wild horse bands, building trust over time, monitoring their health, and providing intervention only when absolutely necessary. Jake proved something we'd forgotten, explains Dr. Patricia Cloud, the program's director. Wild horses are capable of complex relationships with humans that go beyond fear or habituation. They can choose partnership while maintaining their freedom for times a year. Jake returns to the Ruby Mountains the herd has thrived under. This arrangement, growing to 32 members, River, now a magnificent 5-year-old stallion, has assumed a leadership role alongside his mother. He carries himself with the confidence of a horse who knows he is protected, watched over by both his wild family and his human guardian. The reunions remain magical. The herd still performs its greeting ceremony, though it has evolved. Now the younger horses, those born after the rescue, participate with enthusiasm, learning from their elders that this particular human is family. Jake knows each horse by name, their personalities, their stories, but it's the unexpected moments that prove the depth of their bond. When Jake's father passed away 2 years ago, he came to the mountains to grieve. The herd seemed to sense his pain. They surrounded him, not in their usual celebratory circle, but quietly, offering the same comfort he had once given their dying elder. River stood vigil with him through the night, a silent companion in sorrow. The gifts continue. Each visit, the herd presents Jake with their treasures, unusual stones, feathers, and objects that catch their interest. Jake's home now features a display case filled with these offerings, each one a memory, a promise kept. Visitors often ask about them, and Jake shares the story, inspiring others to see wild animals not as resources to manage, but as beings capable of choice, gratitude, and love. River has sired his first foals, and Jake was there for both births. The mares allowed him to approach the newborns, to touch them gently, passing on the trust to a new generation. These foals will grow up knowing that not all humans are threats, that some can be family. The scientific community has studied the Ruby Mountain herd extensively. With Jake's cooperation, their findings have revolutionized the understanding of equine intelligence and emotional capacity. The herd's ability to plan, to communicate complex concepts, to maintain relationships across species, all documented behaviors that challenge traditional views. But for Jake, the science matters less than the simple truth he learned that day by the river. Kindness creates connections that transcend species. The herd didn't just thank him for saving River. They invited him into their world, made him part of their story. Today, when Jake visits, River still performs their special ritual. The grown stallion approaches his human guardian, presses his forehead against Jake's chest, and holds the position, a greeting that belongs only to them. Then he steps back and bows, as his mother taught him, honoring the man who pulled him from the water and became family. The elder mare's braided hair has worn thin on Jake's wrist, but he's never removed it. It's a reminder of the night they trusted him with their grief, the moment he truly became part of the herd. When it finally breaks, he knows they'll understand. The bond it represents can't be broken by time or distance. As Jake often tells the people who seek him out, hungry for their own connection with the wild, they didn't surround me because I was special. They surrounded me because I saw them as special. That's all any of us want, to be seen, to be valued, to know our lives matter to someone. The Ruby Mountain herd runs free, protected by their remote territory and by the knowledge that one human will always come when needed. And Jake Sullivan, wilderness guide turned horse guardian, carries their wild spirits with him everywhere. Proof that the greatest adventures aren't about conquering nature, they're about becoming part of it. Some say it's impossible, that wild horses can't truly bond with humans. Those people have never seen River gallop across a meadow to greet his human, never witnessed a herd of Mustangs bow in gratitude, never felt the weight of wild trust placed in human hands. Jake knows better. He knows that love, respect, and courage can build bridges between any heart brave enough to cross them. The herd taught him that. River proved it, And their story continues written in hoofprints and heartbeats across the Nevada mountains. If this incredible story of wild horses choosing to trust, honor, and include a human in their family touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. Share this video with everyone who needs to believe that connections between humans and animals can transcend fear and become something beautiful. Have you ever experienced a profound moment of connection with a wild animal? Share your story in the comments below. We read every single one. Remember, Jake didn't become part of the herd because he tamed them, but because he honored their wildness while offering help. When needed, let's protect these magnificent creatures and the wild places they call home. Until next time, may we all be worthy of the trust wild hearts choose to give.